This road, it's very different than Freddie from last year. I think the vibe is different. I think Braves fans understand it better. I think Freeman was an abject disaster last year. Like, that was one that should not have gotten to that point. And you can assign blame, whatever. We don't have to relitigate all that. But, like, look, I got a Matt Olson jersey for Christmas, and fellow Parkview guy, graduated with his brother, all that. Watched him at Parkview. Big Matt Olson guy. Good kid. It still was a situation where they were very, very lucky. Like, that one was lucky. They were able to flip Freeman into Matt Olson and getting him to a long-term deal and all that. But that was just a very, very luck. Just Olson was getting ready to leave at the right time. Their A's were rebuilding. You had this franchise first baseman who was going to be on the trade block, and you're able to do that. There was nobody out there at shortstop the Braves were able to just flip and trade for a Dansby replacement, like some young 25-year-old shortstop that you could just sign and who's been on an A's like team. That guy wasn't available. Those guys were free agents. And if you weren't going to pay Dansby, and what we learned is he was the least valued of the four. Xander Bogaerts, Trey Turner, and Carlos Correa all getting bigger deals and bigger priorities than Dansby. And that's what we thought going in. I'm not all concerned. Like, I was far more concerned about what it was going to be like without Freddie Freeman. Just because Freddie Freeman's an NL MVP type player, and even at Olson's best, I don't think he ever gets to that level. I think he'll be a really good player for Atlanta for a long time. I just don't think you'll ever see him win an MVP, and that's okay. That's why you have the Acuñas. That's why you have.
It's hard to win MVP at first base too.
Yeah, I also think Michael Harris probably has more of a chance at this point. Like, I think he's going to be starting. And that's something else you got to consider with Dansby. Is Harris is going to probably start off in the 2 spot next year. He has proven enough that, I think the sky's the limit for Michael Harris. And if he's going to be a great player, then that kind of eases the blow a little bit. I'm just not at all concerned. I think it's going to be like Elvis Andrews or something at short and Vaughn Grissom. And if it doesn't work, they'll make a move. That's why they went under the radar and got creative when they brought in Sean Murphy. I don't know. I just, where are you at now that you've had a couple weeks to digest the Dansby departure and the Sean Murphy addition?
They made the right decision. I think you said it pretty well. I would have liked to have had Dansby Swanson back here, not for that money and not for that length. Like, it's just not. When you think about it, 25 AAV, 25 and a half, I think AAV over the course of that many years. The first thing that's going to go is his defense, and that's just the way it goes at shortstop. And the thing is, if Dansby loses that defense, that Gold Glove style of defensive play, then he loses value very, very rapidly. And at that point, then you're stuck with him. And then it's just, and the thing is, it's like, I don't think it's going to be this crazy drop off to the point where it's like he turns into just an unsalvageable player, because we've seen how good he can be with the bat in his hands. Chicago is interesting for him. I'm not going to get all the way into that necessarily, but I'm glad he found some place that he's going to be a fan favorite very quickly there. They're going to love him in Chicago. But at the end of the day, it's like the Braves have too many fish to fry. They can't afford to lump $25.5 million, the biggest contract they would have ever signed on an AAV, into Dansby Swanson, especially the year after they let Freddie Freeman walk.
Mm-hmm.
Just not something that I see them doing necessarily, especially with some of these other players they have coming due for a contract a la Max Fried. And I think Max Fried is a much more valuable player necessarily. So this is just one of those situations. It's like, it sucks the Braves are not a better team because they lost Dansby Swanson, at least in 2023. However, I think you can survive this. Vaughn Grissom is a fine player. I think he's not exactly ready for this stage, but he also doesn't necessarily have to be. You platoon him. I think you alluded to that quickly. You platoon him in this and find another guy who can come in and kind of take away some of those at-bats from him. Not necessarily at-bats, but just games played. But I think he showed what he could be. I think he also showed how bad he could be. At least we saw that in October. Losing Dansby sucks. Sean Murphy, though, I think is a very interesting deal, because it was a position that was a perceived major strength. We had the best backstop duo in Major League Baseball. And then you go out and trade one of those guys, and then you bring in debatably the best defensive shortstop in the game. if not one of the best. He's right there with JT Realmuto as far as being the best catcher in baseball. And then all of a sudden, I think your position got a little bit better. I think they did substitute, or they lost a little bit as far as the bat goes. But I think Sean Murphy's, he plays well into what this offense wants to do. And I think that says that Contreras just wasn't going to develop. They didn't see that he was ever going to develop into that everyday catcher that they needed him to be once they move on from Travis d'Arnaud in like a year or two. So I think that's really more what they were saying in that regard. But look, at the end of the day, they got the best player in that trade. Sean Murphy is going to be a stud here for the next 5 years, and he's going to be fantastic with this group. So I'm not worried about that. And it's like you turned that into it was going to be an issue, I think, in 2 or 3 years. And Alex Anthopoulos, he's been a master at looking 5 years down the road, not just at next year or the year after that, like our friends in New York. Like we have a team that's set up to be a contender for the next half decade, if not more. So I defer to Alex Anthopoulos on all of these decisions because he's rarely led us astray. But as far as like the depth goes in developing young talent, I think you started talking about that. I think we really have a lot of work to do. I think that one thing that a lot of people talk about is like, oh, well, the Braves farm system isn't where it needs to be. Yeah, because they're all playing Major League Baseball now, and they hit on so many guys. But on that note, we still need to go back and develop some of these assets because we've traded away a lot of these assets for these big players like Matt Olson and Sean Murphy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We got to go back to the farm system and redevelop it. It's going to take some time, but we'll be fine. Braves will be in good shape. We'll be okay. We'll be contending for the division for the next 5 years. We may not win it all 5 times, but we've exceeded the luxury tax, and they've shown us that they have the willingness to spend the money and do what it takes to win.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to be the favorites in the NL East for a while. Like, I think that's just
They've been the favorites the last 5 years.
But that's my thing. Is like I think in baseball is different, where it's like you don't have to be the best team on paper to win the World Series. Like you just need to be in the top 5, 7 team group, right? You just want to be in the mix. If you're in the mix every year, then anything can happen. I mean, the Braves that I think you could even say what 2020 team was better than the 2021 team going into the playoffs.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah,
that team didn't win. And the
the one last year was better than all of them.
Right. So it's just you don't. It's just one of those that I don't really read too much into that. I will say, when you look around the league, like one of the things that you notice for the last couple of years is like there's just a dearth of catcher talent. Like there's just most teams around the league have not figured out the catcher spot. Most of the teams' catchers cannot hit, or they have to sacrifice one way or the other. Either we're going to go defense today or hitting. We just don't have both. And the Braves were like, we're not playing that game with Contreras for years and years. And I will say, and I think even Alex Anthopoulos would probably agree with this, is just that like Sean Murphy is safer, and I think Sean Murphy will be good in Atlanta, and you can count on Sean Murphy for the next 3 to 5 years while you're contending and everything, and you don't have to worry about that position anymore. Mm-hmm. But Contreras still has star potential. He was still an all-star, and you put him in Milwaukee, who has developed catchers really well, especially defensive catchers. You have to be okay if you're a Braves fan of like, hey, Contreras might be an all-star and a perennial all-star in Milwaukee. He could be the better player versus Sean Murphy, but he may never have been that person in Atlanta. I don't know. I'm still pretty high on Contreras. I think losing the bat
I'm very high on Contreras. I'm very high on Contreras. I think Contreras can potentially develop into a player who could hit 40 home runs a year. Like he's that kind of power hitter. The thing is, he would have been doing that in the designated hitter spot, which I think for the Braves, it doesn't make as much sense to have him doing that because Travis d'Arnaud was your defensive catcher. And we talked about this a lot, and I feel like people forget about this very quickly until you're rudely reminded of it. Travis d'Arnaud cannot throw somebody out at second. Mm-hmm. He is incapable of throwing somebody out at second base. Mm-hmm. Sean Murphy doesn't have that problem. The Atlanta Braves as a team are much better for having Sean Murphy on this team. Contreras may be a better hitter. He might be a flashier player, but Sean Murphy makes the Atlanta Braves a better baseball team, period. Mm-hmm. I think that there's just no way around that fact. I mean, but you weren't going to get that deal done without getting a flashy guy like Contreras as a part of it. And d'Arnaud's going to be fine in the designated hitter spot until we move on and we fill that spot with somebody else. But the thing is, it's like that's the beauty of the designated hitter. It could be anybody. You don't need to make it a catcher or something or a first baseman. It could be literally anybody. And the Braves are in a situation where it's like we were kind of hamstrung to those two guys. So we just opened it up a little bit, and we had a good problem where we had so many guys who we could fill into that designated hitter spot. And I think we just opened it up a little bit more for next year, and well, really beyond that.
I'm more worried about left field. Like if they're
I am very worried about left
all
field
over again with Rosario and Ozuna, I'm gonna lose my mind. That I'm more concerned about is not addressing that spot. Like I would prefer they figure something out there before the start of next year. I think if they are just rolling and see what happens, where it's like we think Ozuna and Rosario can bounce back, I'm gonna be like, well, they can't. So I need you to move on from that and figure out Plan B.
Yeah, see, this was my situation. This is my thought process, at least, is that we were going to, whether we re-signed Dansby Swanson or traded for somebody or like a Willie Adams or something or whatever. I thought that they were going to come in, go get a defensive shortstop, go put him at short, and then go stick Grissom in left field, and then just dump Ozuna. Hopefully, just cut him, just do something, get rid of him. I don't know how much that money is guaranteed. I don't even know what they're going to do with that. That's such an ugly contract. It's so bad. But that's what I thought that they were going to do. But left field now just feels almost like they're going to have to run it back. I really don't know what the issue is. Or I mean, I know what the issue is. I just don't know what the solution is. And it's kind of that's the part that's really kind of messing with me here with this team and like really holding me back from saying that this team could really come back and repeat as division title winners. The Braves are going to be very, very good. Like this is a team that's going to win 90 to 100 games, if not more. But you do have the neighbor to the north who is spending buku dollars to make sure that doesn't happen a sixth consecutive time.
Mm-hmm.
So are the Mets a better baseball team than the Braves? No, I don't think so. I think that the way they're running it back with the same team. They're a really good baseball team. They're really, really good.
There's a reason they were in first the majority of last year.
They were on a 101 win pace.
They didn't collapse. Like that's the thing is the Braves just got super hot. The Braves
were on a 116 win pace for like 3.5 months.
Yes.
And everyone's like,
I think people just counted that as like
no,
the Mets collapse. I'm like, no, really the Braves were just that good.
Yeah. It's more, the Braves are just incredible. But the other thing that I feel like doesn't get enough attention to is the Atlanta Braves were on a 116 game winning pace last year with at best 50% Ronald Acuna still coming back, no Ozzie Albies, and a hole in left field. And then Matt Olson really didn't play that well in spurts. Like he was really bad in spurts. Mm-hmm. This team still was on a 116 game win pace. You come back and if not even 2021 pre-injury Ronald Acuna. Like you give me 2020 Ronald Acuna where he's just really good.
Mm.
This team is comfortably winning 98, 99, 100 games. Comfortably. That is how good Ronald Acuna is. Ozzie Albies, if he just comes back and plays Ozzie Albies baseball, comfortably 98, 99, 100 wins. That is how good those guys are. And that's how much the Braves missed them last year.
That's fair. Last thing on the Hawks, Garrett. This is Luka Doncic has been hurting my feelings more so than any other player.
Hurt the Knicks too.
I mean that too. When I saw that the Mavericks were the number one, the favorites to land Trae Young in a potential Trae Young trade was just like that. That was enough for me to like just go take a walk around the neighborhood where. Anything like that ever were to happen, now that it's Landry Field show, I'd have to do some really strong thinking about how much investment I can do with this.